So now let's talk about what prevents us from entering this zone or this flow state. One thing, multitasking. We talked a lot about this yesterday. Multitasking is not only distracting and puts you all over the map, but it's also very inefficient. Multitasking turns out in business to be very inefficient in most cases. There will always be exceptions, and most of the things that I'm talking about here are generalities, just like that statement. My good friend Dean Jackson, who you're going to meet here in a couple of days, one of the smartest guys in marketing, one of the smartest thinkers I've ever met personally in my life, period. We sat down a couple of years ago and he said, here, try this. And he wrote down a list of, I think it was 10 short multiplication problems. And then he wrote down 10 short division problems, as I recall. And it was like 9 divided by 3 and 27 divided by 9, whatever. And he said, okay, do that. And he pulled out his watch, and I did all the problems. And then he wrote out another list, and this time the multiplication problems and division problems were randomly mixed together. And he timed how long it took me to do them. And it took, I don't remember what it was, but 20% longer, or 50% longer for me to do the list where they were one after the other, where they were mixed up. And then he said, I read this article that said that when your brain has to shift gears back and forth, even on something this simple, it takes a while. It takes a while to shift. Interesting. I read some research that said, I don't remember where this was, but it said something to the effect of, if you get distracted, you get taken off track from what you're working on in business, it typically takes something like 20 or 30 minutes before you come back to the thing you were working on. Now, how much does that shifting of gears cost you in terms of efficiency? What's the price of that shift back and forth? I think it's very high. And I think that compounded over time, that it's just like when you hear, if you start saving $1 a day from 20 years before you were born, at the end of your life, you'll be a millionaire, or whatever it is. But if you wait till you're 20 to start saving $1 a day, you'll have a fraction of the overall result. I think it's the same here. Efficiency compounds on itself. If you become really, really efficient, that's like 10 times more powerful than just efficient. And multitasking is a very inefficient way to go, in most cases. A gentleman that I know named Tim Ferriss, very, very smart guy, becoming very popular with his book, The 4-Hour Workweek. He wrote a post to his blog, and it said something to the effect of, pot smoking lowers IQ less than your BlackBerry. And then he cited this article that showed that they tested people who were who were multitasking, checking email and checking their BlackBerries while at work, and then people who were just working, they weren't checking their email BlackBerry, and then they tested people who had smoked pot, and the people who had smoked pot, their IQ was dropped less than by the people who are multitasking. Fascinating. Maybe multitasking is a way of getting high and we don't know it. Never really thought of it that way. Maybe we need to start Multitaskers Anonymous. A new phenomenon that has emerged recently, and it is new. I talked to Ned Hallowell, the author of Crazy Busy, about this. I brought it up and discussed it, and he said, yeah, this is something brand new, something we've never seen before in psychology. I think a woman from Microsoft came up with this. They're calling it continual partial attention. Continual partial attention. And continual partial attention is when your mind has something that it's thinking about and processing on and keeping track of and monitoring and kind of being vigilant about all the time, and it never turns off. Do you know what I'm talking about? Might be some part of your business, might be a report or some stats that you've got to keep checking, It might be relationships with a few people and you just can never unplug. You're like, I gotta be available to them anytime because what if they call? Continual partial attention. Now it's new, so we don't really know what this is doing, but I'll bet that it's doing a lot of bad. I'll bet it's doing a lot of harm. Just like when you're running your computer, we had a problem we've been working on with one of our computers for this week, and last night Den figured out that it just wasn't running right. It was running really slow, so he went into the little box where you can turn off individual programs. You press Control-Alt-Delete on a Mac, and it shows all the processes that are running. You can turn them off individually, and he just started shutting stuff down. And he shut one thing down. He didn't even know what any of it was. He's just like, maybe there's something running on here. He shut one thing down, and boom, all of a sudden, the performance was there. One little thing running, taking up too much memory. So are you paying continual partial attention to something that's just robbing you of your energy, keeping you out of the zone and keeping you out of flow? Because you're always thinking about it, you can't let it go. There's another concept that's called being interrupt-driven. Being interrupt-driven. Now, we like this word driver in our business, and we like the concept of it. It's driving something. It's picking it up and taking responsibility, and I've got this thing. I'm going to drive this all the way through to completion. It's a term we use a lot. Drive. What if you're interrupt-driven? What does that mean? Well, that means that you do one thing until you're interrupted, at which point you stop and go on to the other thing. Do you think that being interrupt-driven is a conscious process or an unconscious process? How many people that are completely interrupt-driven are aware of it consciously? What percentage? I don't know, probably small. And because we entrepreneurs, we're blessed or cursed. Typically, we're pretty intelligent, we're resourceful, we're creative. We're interrupt-driven, and then we make up these stories about it. Oh, no, I'm not interrupt-driven. I'm just multitasking. I'm paying attention to a lot of stuff at once. No, you don't get it. You don't understand. I have friends, and I call them up in business, and I say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Oh, man, things are just crazy over here. That's a problem if it's the way it is all the time. My mentor, Jerry, that I keep bringing up, who is very influential on me, he had a concept called being addicted to your struggle. Being addicted to your struggle. We humans, especially those of us that have had a little bit of success in life, we don't like to admit that we have the same needs as everyone else, the same desires. We want attention and approval. We want people to admire us. We want higher social status. We want love and affection, right? We want these things, and they're running unconsciously all the time. Why would someone become addicted to their struggle? That doesn't seem to make sense. Until you realize that there could be a bunch of these secondary payoffs from being addicted to your struggle. If you're addicted to your struggle, whenever you see anyone, you can be like, oh man, it was a tough day today. Oh, I had this thing happen, and I had that thing happen, and this problem happened. And people can say to you, wow, you must be really busy. You must be a very successful entrepreneur if you're dealing with all of those types of problems. Oh, I really feel for you. Or even just as simple as to have someone pay attention to you. Now, I realize no one here can identify with any of those things. So we're not talking about us, we're talking about those other people outside. But who here has ever been interrupt-driven for a good portion of their career? Wait, don't raise your hand. Don't get too excited yet. This guy's over here is like, I have two hands up. Who's been interrupt-driven or maybe even a little bit addicted to your struggle? Just a little bit. Okay, good. Safe in here. My buddy Dean Jackson that I mentioned before, he made up this term that now he and I and a couple of our other friends, we call it the OCD loop. And it's the electronic OCD loop. And here's how it works. When you have a free moment come up in your day, you run over to your computer, and you sit down, and you check your email, and then you check your stats, and then you're watching some auctions on eBay, so you go over to eBay, and then you got your business email, and you check that. You check a couple other things, and then by the time you're done, you don't have anything else to do, so you start back at the top, and you check your email again, and then you check your stats, and then you check your auctions. Oh, maybe I'll do a little more searching. It's the OCD loop, the electronic OCD loop. Whenever you get any free time, you're like, okay, I probably have about 14 minutes here. Okay, get over there and get the OCD loop going. Like something is going to have happened. Who has ever been in the OCD loop? Isn't that bizarre? It's like you heard about the experiments with the rat and the cocaine thing in its arm, and it'll just sit there like. It's a little spooky, actually. To this day, I find myself unconsciously walking over to the computer, turning it on, checking my email, looking at my stats, whatever, and now I kind of, okay, whoa. You didn't even realize you were doing that. It's like when you walk to the closet and you pull out some junk food and you're just munching on it, you're not even thinking about it. Stay out of the OCD loop. Become conscious of it. Slap yourself. Do whatever you have to do. Stay out of that OCD loop. It will rob you of time. It will suck up your time and energy like you wouldn't believe. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to just bring it up one more time. Another little quirk of human psychology is we love to focus on what the other guy is getting instead of on what we're getting. So there have been experiments done where they'll sit two people down. This, by the way, is one of my very favorite experiments ever. So they'd sit two people down that don't know each other, that have never met, and then put $100 in front of one of them and say, you decide how the money's going to be split up. So they might take $50 and say, okay, the other person can have 50, and I'll keep 50. And then here's where the fun part, here's the kicker. The other person says, yes, let's do it, or no, neither of us get any money. So person A, put $100 in front of them, they say, you decide how the money's going to be split up. Person B, you get to make the call. Are you guys both getting the money, or is no one getting any money? When it's split 50-50, person B says, let's do it. But there's a threshold, maybe around that 70-30 point, where person A says, you get 30 and I get 70, where person B says, now think about that. What they're saying is, no, I don't want 30 free dollars. Because I can't stand that other son of a bitch who's going to get 70. So when you cross over that line, that magical line of 70-30, person B says, so then the psychologist said, well, maybe this is because $100 is not that much money to play with, whatever. So then they went over to third world countries and used $100, where $100 represented a couple or a few months' income. And guess what? Same thing. No, I'd rather not have a month's income for free because I can't stand to see that guy get more. I just can't deal with it. Now, if that isn't the monkey holding on to the nut in the hole, I've never heard it. So I got to break some news to you. This is just between us here. We all have that same mechanism in our heads. And we're all looking at what the other guy's getting all the time, and we can't help it because we came wired with it. It actually helps us and serves us and protects us most of the time. It has a positive function. It does a lot of great things for us. But in business, where things are, remember, counterintuitive, the path to success is not obvious, that thing kicks in, and we tell ourselves all these stories about it, and we're over here selling $1 million worth of product, and somebody over here is stealing $100 worth, and we got to call the attorneys, and we got to get them, and we got to right this wrong and this injustice in the world. I see a lot of fidgeting and people moving around like, oh, dude, this isn't what I thought. We were going to do some marketing, and when's the headline writing part? This is how you get to writing great headlines. You become aware of this stuff. Because once you can become aware of it in yourself, then you can talk to it. Then you can talk to it in other people. And once you can talk to it in other people, then you have a lot of power, because you're talking about things that no one is willing to talk about. You're admitting them about yourself. You're talking about how you have this weird little thing that you do, and your customer goes, oh my God, I have that weird little thing that I do too. Nobody ever talks about that thing. And when you're writing your copy, instead of saying, I drove to work this morning and I had a great realization that maybe my customers might like to buy this certain product, and so here it is if you'd like to buy it, we write copy that says, hey Bob, I realized something crazy today on my way to work. I was driving and this guy in another car cut me off. It wasn't really that serious. He just cut me off a little, and now that I think about it, he probably didn't even mean to cut me off. But it really got to me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And for the next 15 minutes on the way to work, I kept thinking, maybe I could go around him. And maybe I could cut him off a little bit. And maybe I could get him back somehow. That's the kind of copy, that's the kind of communication that people pay a lot of attention to. Because there's something happening there where they say, wow, you're like me, you're weird like me. I do that weird little thing, and I've never heard anybody talk about that. Remember, the more personal, the more universal. Good. Friction. Friction is anything in your business or life that slows you down, that catches on things, that snags, and that makes things not work smoothly. Friction. Look for friction. Use the word to describe it. When you're going through life, it's almost like you've got those little Velcro things on and you're running things and going, and it's just catching. So work on streamlining all processes. Try to remove as much friction as you can proactively. There's a great scene in the movie The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio. He played Howard Hughes, who was one of the most eccentric people that's probably ever lived, was the richest guy in the world for a while, very successful, very, very weird, brilliant, intelligent, creative individual. And he would fly all of the test planes because he wanted to be the one to break the speed barrier and to just get out there. And there was a scene in the movie that, well, it'll always be in my mind. It really made an impression on me. And they were streamlining the planes and making them more powerful and more streamlined and more aerodynamic. And there was one scene where he came walking out, and they had this beautiful, like brushed aluminum or chrome plane, and it was all shiny. And he was walking along the wing, and the little rivets in the wing were sticking up, like this much, and he's running his hand over them. And he said, "Now we got to get rid of these." And his engineers were like, come on, what are you talking about? Look at how, and he's like, no, we got to get rid of these. And then they went back to work on it, and then it flashes to the next scene, and his hand's running over this smooth edge of the wing, and the rivets are gone, and then he's up in the plane breaking the speed limit. And he was aware of something, right? He got something that other people didn't get, that nobody else could see. That even though it's air, and even though those rivets are that small, that they're still catching. They're still holding him back. And that he could even take that powerful plane that was probably the fastest plane in the world at the time or whatever, and streamline it even more by smoothing it off completely. So where can you do that? Where can you streamline in your own life? Where can you streamline in your business? Let me give you a couple of quick techniques. Here are some ways to remove friction. Now that we've got the mindset. Counterintuitive again. There was a great book called Stop Setting Goals If You'd Rather Solve Problems, written by a guy named Bob Beal. And in this book, he said something that I thought was profound. He said, most people don't like setting goals. Just at a gut level, it just doesn't appeal to them. And he said that something like 80% of people are what he called problem solvers. They prefer solving problems to setting goals. Watch this. Just write that down and then watch this. Who here would prefer to solve problems rather than set goals? Raise your hand. Serious, raise your hand. Okay. Look at how many people that is. That's most of the people in the room. Here, and this is entrepreneurs who tend to skew toward more goal-oriented people. So one of the things that I've discovered is that when you're working with a team of people, if you want to remove some friction up front, instead of sitting down with them and saying, okay, group, let's set a goal. What's the goal? Sit down and say to everybody, what are some of the problems we need to solve right now? To your group. Start with, what are some of the problems that we need to solve right now? Many entrepreneurs are very frustrated that their teams argue with everything. Oh, we can't do that. Oh, that won't work. Oh, that's too stressful. Not obvious, counterintuitive. Sit down with your team. I recommend that you do this. This is one that you could implement right now. You could write an email at the break that says, hey, you know what? We've got this project coming up, or we've all been working on this project. What are some of the problems that you see with it? What are some of the problems we're going to need to solve? And just see what your team comes up with. And you don't have to buy into all of them or say, oh gosh, these are really big problems. And by the way, when your team is saying, we have a lot of problems here and problems we need to solve, they're not being negative. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to get to the objective. They're trying to fix things and make it better. So if you start with, what are some of the problems we need to solve? You preempt it. And guess what? You fulfill their needs first. Another way to remove friction, this is something that Ralph taught me. I've mentioned Ralph a lot. Be careful when you're brainstorming around your team. A brainstorm from you sounds like an order to them. It sounds like a mandate. It sounds like something that they should be doing. So be very careful. And when you're brainstorming, say, you know what? I'm going to brainstorm right now. Let's not do any of the things I'm about to say. And you got to keep saying it over and over. Let's brainstorm right now. You know what? I got a couple of ideas on the way over here. Let's brainstorm a little bit. Let's not do any of these things. I just want to talk about them. What are some of the problems you see? Another one is to share your thinking process. This is super, ultra, mega counterintuitive. If you have been thinking about an idea or a project you want to work on, or you've been setting a goal, doing your entrepreneurial thing, and you've been working on it and calculating it in your head, and then you sit down with your team and you say, okay, here's what we're going to do. I've made all the decisions. I laid the whole plan out. I figured it all out. Now just go do this. That's not something that empowers other people. That's not something that people get excited about. And they go, yeah, that's what I want to do. Why? They weren't involved. They didn't get to help. It wasn't their idea. And one of the things that I've discovered is very powerful is to sit down and say, so I've got this idea, it's kind of a brainstorm, and I'd love to get your advice, your insight, see what you think about it, see if there are any problems with it, see what you see, and then take them through the process of how I figured this idea out, where I got the idea from, what triggered it, what data I used to make the decision, how I did this other one. Then I called up a friend of mine, I got some advice from them, and here's how I built the case, here's my whole decision-making process, and then I arrived at this, and then I think that if we do these 4 steps, we could get to that. What do you think? There's my whole case. I've laid my thinking, my reasoning, my model. It's all right here. What do you think of that? Now that can be very engaging with other people. Why? For one, just simply, it's that you're trusting them and you're being open. You're not hiding anything. You're not trying to control other people by saying, I'm the leader and I'm the boss, and so you should do what I tell you. So tell other people your thinking process. Teach them how you're thinking about things and do it on a regular basis. Explain it. Quickly. Not letting go. Huge friction. Not letting go. I've heard this phrase a bunch of times. It's a cute little saying. What you stick with, you get stuck with. Something I've found very useful in my life is to, on a regular basis, try to let go of everything. Not get attached to anything. Not get too attached to a process, a meeting, a car, anything in my home, anything. Just try to not be too attached to anything. Why? Because if I'm attached to something, there's no space for something else that could be better. If I'm not really attached, but I'm just trying to be a good shepherd of the things that are around me, I can be open. I was at a friend's house who's in this room, who will go nameless, and we went over there and we were in the middle of doing a bunch of things, and we were kind of going between stuff, and it was a pretty busy day. And he ran into his laundry room, and he was changing his laundry, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm just getting my laundry done in here." And I said, "He's got this big, beautiful house," and I said, not to be a pain in the ass, but why are you doing your laundry? I mean, you're busy. Look, you got all this stuff going on. And he was like, "Come on, what are you talking about? Of course I do my own laundry, It just would only make sense. It only takes a minute." I don't know. Does it only take a minute? When I talk to people, entrepreneurs who are trying to get to the next level, one of the questions that I ask, especially if they've achieved some level of success, is, do you do your own laundry? Do you do your own shopping? Do you wash your own car? Are you doing all that stuff? Yes? Why? If they say, well, I'm a gourmet chef, and it's really enjoyable. My wife and I, we go down to the market, and we pick out the vegetables ourselves, and we talk about the dishes that we're going to create, and then we go home and we cook together, and we enjoy what we do. I say, good, stick with that. If they say, oh, you know what, that's just my, that's my work ethic. I couldn't just have somebody else do that kind of stuff. Holding on to those things instead of letting them go. If you hear me say this right now and you're doing anything, if you've got cash flow and your bills are paid and you're doing anything that's worth less than $50 or $100 an hour, you're robbing yourself. And worse, you're robbing your team and you're robbing your business. Because rather than spending an hour doing your laundry and going shopping that day, I'd rather if you spent the hour unplugged, relaxing, sitting out by the pool, going to a museum, spending time with a friend, laughing and having a good time. You will be so much better for it.